Welcome to Guitar Gavel, a place for people who love guitars. These are conversations with musicians, guitar enthusiasts, techs, and collectors about their guitar journey and their love of the instrument. Thanks for tuning in. Please hit the subscribe button, share with your friends, and be sure to sign up for our twice weekly newsletter at guitargavel.com. Hey everybody, it's David Still. Welcome to the Guitar Gavel podcast, and I am pleased to have my latest guest, Brian Stoltz, with us today. Brian, I will let you speak in a minute. I've got to at least run through some biographical information here and
there you go.
Some accolades. Thank you to everyone watching and or listening. I appreciate your time. Brian and I were just talking about everybody's attention span on the click through and the swipe through these days. So we do appreciate you hanging out with us and spending some time. We're in for a real treat. For Brian's fans and those that are familiar with Brian, I could forego the introduction, but I'm sure there might be one or two people out there that need a little introduction. So Brian is a native of New Orleans. I grew up in the 7th Ward. If I've got my ducks in a row, Brian, is that right?
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
And started playing out at bars, gigging when he was 15, and thought he might like to go to Southern Louisiana University, but decided it's time to hit the road and continued cutting his playing chops, man, down the hollers and the backwoods and the bayous of Louisiana, and then eventually spread out throughout the Southeast. And then had a couple stints on Bourbon Street, of course. Had to have.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yes, and it was on Bourbon Street where he hooked up with Art and Aaron Neville and created a long friendship and a working relationship with them and joined the Neville Brothers in 81. Finished out the 80s playing with the Neville Brothers, spent 25 years with the Funky Meters. Maybe played a little bit with Bob Dylan. We'll get into that too throughout, but I could keep on going with the list of names, and we're going to talk about some of that. Brian also has a new album that's coming out April 2nd. That is the tentative date of, or the firm date, one of the two of this year, called New World Rising. So we're going to talk about New World Rising in the album. We're actually going to focus on that and give it its own podcast episode and focus on the album. And we'll talk a little bit about it today, but we're just going to kind of go through the history of Brian and learn about Brian, man, and hear some good stories. So Brian, after 2 minutes and 20 seconds of me running my mouth, thank you. And we'll turn it over to you, man. I really like to start with just kind of hear how things got going when you were a kid, man.
Oh, well, thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, yeah, I grew up in 7th Ward, New Orleans, Gentilly area. And, I got started with music really, it was all because of the Beatles. 1963, 1964, you started hearing those great tunes on the radio, And New Orleans had a really great, New Orleans was really unique as far as radio, pop radio, because we had some great stations back then. And a lot of those stations, they played everything. You would hear, you'd hear a Fats Domino tune, and then you'd hear a Beatle tune, and then you might hear a James Brown song, and then you might hear something by some other. They played local artists, so you heard Fats Domino and Lloyd Price, the Meters, stuff like that. Well, the Meters wasn't until later on, but and when I was a kid, and you hear all of this stuff, I didn't know that, I wasn't aware that. The Beatles are from England and Fats Domino lives right down the street, I mean, but at some point I became aware of all of that. And I came to play with a lot of the people that I grew up listening to on the radio, Aaron Neville, Neville Brothers, Art Neville. And so that was basically the foundation, hearing Beatles songs on the radio. And around the same time, I had an uncle that somebody had left an old acoustic guitar at his house, and he gave it to me. And so I just banged on that thing for a couple of years, just banging on it. That's all I knew how to do. And then I found out that the man that lived across the street from me was a professional guitar player, played on Bourbon Street at a Dixieland club. And I went over there and he showed me a few chords and I got him down instantly. I came home and I was playing a little song he taught me, And then from there, I just took it, I started to be able to hear those chords in other songs, and just started to be able to work out songs and, little by little got it together. I've never had any formal training or anything, but that's how it happened.
Your origin story is parallels. I mean, so many guitar players. The Beatles starts with the Beatles. Not everyone, but a lot, right? Or just musical interest in general, and then somebody having a guitar laying around with strings that are about 1 inch off the fretboard.
Oh man, it was bad.
Either the terrible action on those crappy old guitars either made the world full of better guitar players, or the world lost some guitar players that could have been greats that just said, man, I can't play this thing. I'm done, and never played it.
Yeah, I think it helped because, I had the will to keep going. And boy, it was tough. It built my hands up pretty good, It was a monster to play. But I didn't know anything about lighter strings or anything. I played them old rusty strings for years. I didn't know you were supposed to change them.
Hey man, ignorance is the best, right?
That's right. It is bliss.
I want to, man, I hate to do that. I'm going to jump around on you for a minute because you talked about hearing the Nevilles on the radio and then getting to play with them. So I want to, can we visit that for a second? What's that feeling like when you've grown musically and professionally to be able to play with an artist that you were a fan of and have that opportunity and have that conversation?
It's an amazing feeling. I mean, I remember, I guess the first was Aaron Neville had Tell It Like It Is out in, I guess that was 1966. And that was a huge song on the radio, and such a beautiful song. And I met those guys in 81. And to be playing with them and traveling around the world and writing songs with them, that was really an amazing thing, to think, I felt, came full circle here from 1966 to 81, and here I'm working with him, it was wonderful,
Did you run
and Aaron remained a good friend. I talked to him this morning. He called me this morning, as a matter of fact. We still talk a couple times a week.
Oh man.
Yeah.
How's he doing?
He's doing well. He lives up in North State, New York. He lives on a beautiful farm. He's got a farm up there, and he's retired now, so he's just relaxing, and we send music back and forth to each other. I send him a copy of the album. He always sends me stuff he's got, so we talk still a couple times a week.
Did you run in, were you starstruck ever? I know I'm dancing all over the place, but since we're talking about that, because you played with a lot of household names, man,
Yeah, I guess in some ways, not really, I've met a whole lot of people, and I don't ever remember getting ever, the way I couldn't speak or anything, I mean, I've definitely realized, who I was standing in front of at the time. Like, when I joined the Neville Brothers, I played 4 shows or 5 shows with them, and we started the Rolling Stones tour, Rolling Stones Tattoo You tour, because I did a little audition with Neville Brothers, and they liked it. So their manager said, be at Tipitina's Friday night. You got the gig. So I played a Friday, Saturday night with them. And then that Tuesday we left for Texas. We played Austin, We played Houston, Austin, and then Dallas. And I think when we got to Dallas, Bill Graham had called and said, "Be in Louisville Tuesday night to start the Stones tour." So, it went from, nothing to the Stones tour. And I remember seeing all of those guys for the first time. And it was a little, it took me back a little bit when I first saw them, but, they just regular guys,
Yeah,
you
that's
know?
right. That's right. I mean, that's a whirlwind, man. You went, what, in about a week and a half?
Yeah, well, I mean, more than that, better than that, because I was out of work for about 6 months before that because I developed carpal tunnel syndrome in my left hand.
Mhm.
And one night on Bourbon Street, my hand just fell, and I couldn't lift my arm up, and I had to have surgery. And back then, surgery meant you were out for 6 months,
Mhm.
so I couldn't play for 6 months or so. And right when I was getting it back together, getting my strength back, starting to practice a bit, so that's when Art Neville called and said, "Hey, you want to come play with us?" And a couple of days after that, I was at this so-called audition, and 3 days after that, I was at Tipitina's, and a week later, I was out with the Stones. Things
That's
happen
like
fast.
that's a Hollywood script, man. That really
I
is.
know. Yeah.
Well, obviously a lot of fun and work going into, being in the position to be there in 1981 to get the
Yeah.
call from Art. What if we go back, into the 70s? What were some of your pivotal or seminal moments in your either in your musical upbringing or as your young professional careers, as you're really, I mean, I hate to you I'm not a fan of the word grind, but I mean grinding. I mean, you were out there working, and you got to put in the reps and the hours. When you think back on that decade, what were some big reflections for you?
Well, when I got I mean, by the time I got out of high school, I was already playing. I mean, I was out playing country bars and juke joints and stuff like that. I had a cousin who played guitar, and when I was, I don't know, I must have been 14, 15, something like that. He called me up and said, "Man, come make some of these gigs with me," and I started playing this little country bar out in Salt Bayou. And, we were playing Johnny Cash tunes and Patsy Cline and Hank Williams tunes. Uh, I'll never forget that, because uh, it was just one of them juke joints where, man, these guys would get drunk and just come put $100 bills in the tip jar. They came up and they wanted to hear a particular tune. Whether you knew it or not, you played it. You played it as close as you could, man. They'd put 20s, hundreds, 50s. They'd fill up that tip jar. I was making more money back then with that than I do now sometimes. So that was I'll never forget that. But after that I started putting together rock bands and blues rock type bands. Um, I spent a semester in college studying classical guitar, but that didn't that didn't pan out. I started thinking, man, why am I doing this? What I want a degree in classical guitar. What am I gonna do with that? And do I really want that? So I quit and just started playing and traveling all over, mostly traveling all over South Louisiana, traveling through the state. And then we got us a school bus, an old converted school bus, and started traveling all over regionally. Um, And that's what I remember most about the 70s, just playing all over the place, just playing for next to no money or no money or, playing for the hat, playing for the tip jar, playing for the door. And then towards the later 70s, I started playing more around town, playing clubs, Bourbon Street. Um, they had a little part of town called Fat City where disco came in, took over everything. So I
Yes,
sold all my Marshall amps and bought a blue suit and a little combo amp and started doing that. But it was better than working at the auto parts store.
yeah.
So even though I had to do that, I still got to play every night, you know?
Right. It's all out of love. I mean, that's
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
right?
And I love a lot of that music now. I hated it back then. But now I hear some of those songs now and I think how great they were. When you think about some of the better disco stuff, you know, like the Nile Rodgers stuff and Chic, you know, stuff like that, man, that's great, great music, you know?
The Bee Gees did a lot of great stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it's you know, it's funny. We will not stay down the disco rabbit hole, but here for a second, depending on who you ask, a guitar purist may say that was the day the music died.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, I
but
might have thought so back then, but I don't think that way now.
right, I think in retrospect, I mean, disco brought so much to the table. It was foreign at the time. Is that fair to
Yeah.
say? Depending
Yeah.
on your circle, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But when you think about stuff like Nile Rodgers, Chic, Sister Sledge, you know, things like that, all the stuff that Nile was involved in, man, he brought a whole new thing, you know, a whole new world of music to us that's still big, you know, and still relevant, I think, you know.
I mean, we talk about the disco and your talk about not staying. If you know a guitar player not staying in their lane, you got all genres under your belt. I would say for the most part. I'm sure there's something off the table there, but how did is that just a product of where you grew up, your musical interest, or was any of that kind of becoming a well-rounded guitar player? Was some of that due to your environment and needing to know to play X, Y, and Z, um, or was there no rhyme or reason to it all?
Well, you know, as far as the disco thing, it was out of necessity.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
it was I mean literally it was, you know, rock bands had died. Blues, you know, blues pretty much, you know, never really caught on, you know. So it was like, well, I can either go, you know, take a job at, you know, the Kmart or something, or I can, you know, start playing disco, you know. And so it was out of necessity. But you know, in New Orleans, and as far as New Orleans music, New Orleans style music, that's never changed. You know, that's always been pretty even keeled. You know, the music that a lot of artists from New Orleans are making today is pretty similar to the music they were making in the '60s. You know, in a lot of ways. I mean, it's made headway, but still, in a lot of ways, it's the same. There's some unchanging elements there. You know, but I mean, it's all of that. On one level, it's no rhyme or reason. On another level, it's necessity. On another level, it's like, hey, this is the way music's going. You can either jump on board or you can be left behind. You know,
Yeah.
and I don't, I I never was a type of player that looked to play everything. I mean, there's a lot of styles and genres I don't really touch. Um, I mean, I hear something, I either like it or I don't like it. It either interests me or it don't interest me, you know. And when I was younger, you know, when I was younger, yeah, I thought, well, being from New Orleans, I had to study jazz. You know, I had to know jazz. And so there was a short period where, when I was about 18 or 19, I went to really great guitar teacher here in town. His name's Hank Mackey. He wrote a lot of those Mel Bay books. Matter of fact, I think he was married to Mel Bay's daughter, and he's just a phenomenal teacher. He's a great player, but he's a phenomenal teacher. He's got a way of communicating that nobody else has. And I went to him for a few sessions, and you know, finally he said, "Man, what are you coming to me for? You know, you kind of got this stuff down, you know." But and then I also realized that I never was interested in a career in jazz either, you know.
Hmm.
So I dropped off after a while, and that's another form that I never really got back into. You know, um, I like music that people are more relatable. You know, more relatable to people. You know,
Sure. Sure.
like Branford Marcellus told me one time he had a he met this girl a long time ago. He met this girl. He brought her to a gig, brought her to the club, and he did a set. And when he came off the set, the girl said, "Man, that's music for crazy people." And, and so I believe he named one of his albums "Music for Crazy People." And I don't necessarily believe that, but you know, my whole thing has always been more blues based, blues rock based, you know, that type of thing. You know, I love blues. I love old blues. I love the Delta stuff. You know, I still listen a lot to the Delta stuff. You know, all those old artists.
I'm going to deviate for a moment
Uh-huh.
on the Delta stuff, and I'm going to speak a little out of term because I don't want to pretend to know this well or be any sort of historian. Um, and definitely a very mediocre guitar player. I have to throw that in somewhere, everywhere, you know, just to keep it all in check. When we talk about those old players that were so pivotal in so many guitar players' career or interest, you know, weird tunings because no one knew what the tuning was because there was no standard to tune by. Playing just with whatever apparatus was around and using your fingers just because it was the best way for you to use your digits, regardless of style, regardless of know-how, and how that is just, you can't get that. I mean, obviously you can't get that in a classroom. You can't get that from a teacher. That is just
No,
observation and all from the heart and all just your brain making your hands do what this, trying to get the sound that's in your brain. And I don't know where my question was with this, but that's so powerful and so impactful. I don't know. It maybe the question is that lost as we've become more sophisticated in music, or is that there? Or am I just out of touch?
I think we've become too sophisticated. I definitely think that because you can't you can't learn that in school. You can't write it down on paper. I mean, you can, but copping the feel, you're never going to cop the feel from it, you know. And you can never explain it to somebody. You know how you going to explain a blues record from the 30s, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, when you hear guys like Rolling Stones, Keith Richards, and everybody talking about the first time they heard it, they thought they were listening to some alien music from another planet or something, you know. It's so different, you know. Um, but yeah, I think we've become a little too clever. You know, some musicians are too clever for their own good, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I hear a lot of people talking about school, you know, and you know, learning music, and that was always such a strange thing to me, learning music, man.
Yeah.
You mean learning music? You know, you listen to music and you just play music, you know. I mean, I guess because it was just such a natural thing for me, you know. I guess if you're intellectual, maybe you have to approach it that way, you know, by studying it, you know. And but I don't know, it's just such a foreign concept to me, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
because I'm like, you know, I look at guys like Muddy Waters, and you know, Muddy Waters didn't know nothing about, you know, he couldn't read music, and you know, he didn't know nothing about all that. He was music, you know. So I guess I'm primitive in that way, you know, but uh I've just got me this far, you know.
You did all right, man.
I'll stick with it, you know. I'll stick with it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, if if it's cool, about the '80s and playing with the Neville Brothers, and then getting hooked up with Dylan and just some of those experiences. I mean, that's a broad stroked question, man. What are some of the highlights when you think back on the opportunities and the experiences you had?
But yeah, Neville Brothers opened up a whole new world, you know, because I mean, right off the bat, we were touring worldwide. We would tour all over the States. We'd go to Europe once or twice a year. We go to Japan once a year. So I definitely got my cultural education, got to experience things that, a lot of people don't get to witness, get to see. And when Neville Brothers were touring, when we were in a place, like if we were in LA or we were in New York, all of the really great musicians and artists would come out. They were all Neville Brother fans. So it was common to get to a show in LA and, oh God, Bette Midler's there and Rita Coolidge was there and a lot of different musicians. I remember going out by George Duke's house. It took me to George Duke's house one day, seeing all kinds of people. And then when we get to somewhere like London, all the U2 guys were there, Sting, people like that, so it was meeting a lot of people like that. They were all, I met Daniel Lanois at the New York show. We played at the Ritz in New York, and Daniel Lanois comes walking in the dressing room. That's when we started a relationship with him, and he ended up producing the Yellow Moon album. So yeah, just got to meet a whole lot of great people, a whole lot of great artists, and travel all over the world, just doing great shows. And Neville Brothers was a band that I don't never remember a bad show.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not one, because we had such a fiery attitude. Every night before the show, we would huddle up, and Art Neville would take the stage, and Art Neville would say, "All right, take no prisoners, band." And we didn't. I mean, we would go out there and no matter how much we were back in the dressing room fighting and carrying on and arguing about something, when we got on stage, we looked each other in the eye and laughed and just played like fools, And yeah, it was just on fire all the time, I mean, I say if there was a band like that now, they would be huge. Neville Brothers, that was the problem though. Neville Brothers were 30, 40 years ahead of their time. They were too ahead of their time.
Yeah.
Fans couldn't catch up. World couldn't catch up.
As a player, that would seem like an experience that you'll be hard to want to put down. I mean, you do get tired and you get road worn and you grow older and body can't do this and that. And you have different interests, but I would think that being in that environment is just hard to let go. Cause that seems like something out of this world special.
Yep. Yeah. It was a great, I was with him for 10 years from 81 till 90. And, it was just, I have nothing but fond memories of those years. Despite anything bad that happened, or despite all the problems and business problems, and no matter how much of their management tried to get in between me and them, I have nothing but fond memories of those guys, and all those times, Yeah.
Took you all over the world, changed your life, that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we'd be in Europe once or twice a year, Japan every year. And I think every country through Europe. I mean, all through Europe and the Netherlands and Finland, everywhere.
Well, I want to piggyback on that and kind of deviate for a second, because I've got to ask. So when you were touring, how about, it doesn't matter. Well, I'm going to switch to guitars for just 3 minutes. I won't ask you what your favorite child is by asking you what's your favorite guitar. What
is my favorite guitar?
But what have you what have you enjoyed playing over the years? What's been some of your go-tos that kind of have stuck with you, and any memorable guitar that maybe that got away?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, because of that theft, a bunch of them got away. But more fortunately, the my favorite ones I had at the house, so they didn't get stolen. The one I play the most, I play mostly, and it's just a natural thing. I naturally fall back to it because it's such a good guitar. I have like a mid '80s Stratocaster that I bought in Tokyo in, I guess, 1985, or I think it was 84 or 85. And it has a scalloped fingerboard on it.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I was in Tokyo, and I walked into this music store, and they had 5 white Stratocasters on the wall. All had scalloped fingerboards, scalloped maple fingerboards. And I was real interested in that because I used to read about all of John McLaughlin stuff and the Mahavishnu. I was a big Mahavishnu fan. And I'd read about his guitars being scalloped, and I always wondered, what is that about, you know? And so I took one off the wall, I played it, it didn't sound very good. I put it back, I got another one, it didn't sound very good. But something told me, try all 5 of them. And when I got to the fourth one, I tried all 5, but the fourth one I picked up sounded completely different from the others. It was like a totally different guitar, even though they were all identical. And I bought that one. And I came home. I had, I can't remember his name now. A guy that made great pickups back then, Bob. Oh man, I can't remember his
And I'm
name.
not helping you out. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
was trying to remember to tell Chris the other day, and neither one of us could. I couldn't remember his name, but he sold a company years ago. They still make pickups, but he sold a company years ago. Anyway, he lived in Virginia Beach, and we were doing a show there. So I had him build me a set of Strat pickups, and he came down to the show. He dropped them in at a sound check, and it sounded so much. It sounded even better. So I've been playing that guitar mostly since then.
How about that?
I mean, I also have a '68 Strat that I use in the studio. I never take it on the road or anything, but I have a '68 Strat, and then I have a mid '80s Strat Plus that I don't play very often. American made, but I don't play it very often. It's not as good as the Japanese one.
Yeah.
And I have a '74 custom Telly that I really like. And but right now I mostly play that Strat, and I have a Telly that um, a friend of mine a friend of mine's husband died, and he had a bunch of old Squires, and she was trying to sell them. So I helped her sell some of them, and I bought the Telly from her, and I bought it mainly just to have something laying around the house. You know, I didn't ever think I was going to use it on gigs or anything. You know, but I started playing it, and it didn't sound bad, but I hated those little skinny frets on it. You know,
Mhm.
so I bought a Fender neck with medium jumbos, and I put another neck on it. And I said, well, while I'm at it, I really liked that it was thin. You know, it was thinner than a regular Telly body, so it was lighter. And I need that more and more because I've had rotator cuff surgeries on both shoulders and neck issues, and so weight's a problem. So I like that it was thinner. So I ended up redoing the whole thing. I swapped out all the electronics. I put a new wire and harness in. I put all new top of the notch pots, and I put a set of Texas specials in it. And man, that guitar screams, man. It's a great, great guitar. I use it a lot now. Yeah. In the
That's
studio and live. Yeah.
wow. Well, in great relationship to the guitar from your friend, man. It was one of his, you know.
Well, what's that?
I said in a great relationship to the guitar because it was
Oh
your
yeah.
buddy. You know,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
adds a little it's
Yeah.
another dynamic to it, man.
Yeah. I did the same thing with I bought a Gretsch. I bought one of those Korean made Gretsch, South Korean I think it's South Korea, maybe Indonesia, made Gretches. I think it's a 5420 Electromatic. And it sounded pretty good stock, but I had TV Jones build me a new set of pickups, and I changed the wire and harness and the switch jack and all the pots. And man, it's a totally different guitar, man. It is a great guitar.
That's
And I've been using that one a bit too lately.
cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I won't keep us on guitars all day long because we want to talk about some of your music in New World Rising coming out, and we're gonna kind of do a deeper dive, on that in a separate episode. You recorded 4 albums, solo albums today.
Yeah.
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 And how long have you been working on the latest one?
On this one, it seems like forever. Yeah, there's a long story behind it. Actually, some of the songs are new. Some of the songs I've been having for quite a while because, you see, back I did it in 2005. I did a record called God, Guns, and Money, and it was a commentary on the Iraq War. Um, I have a younger brother who ended up doing 2 deployments in Iraq, and at the time I was just, it had me mad, lying to those kids, telling them Iraq was involved in 9/11, and they had soldiers actually believing that, and so the whole thing just didn't sit well with me at all. And I wrote this song. I was working on a whole different record. I was working on more of a pop, rock type record, rock, blues, rock record, whatever you want to call it. And I wrote this song called War Song that's on God, Guns, and Money album. And I thought that was going to be the only one I did like that. I thought about maybe putting it on a record. I don't know. But then a friend of mine, Greg Barnhill, he's a songwriter from Nashville. Greg came down to work with me one weekend. I wanted him to sing on some of that stuff. And Greg heard the song and he said, "Man, you should do a whole album like that." And I thought, no, I could never do that. 12 songs, all with that war theme. I don't know if I could do it. But after he left, I kept thinking about it. And then next thing you know, another song came, and then another song came, and then, and then my brother got deployed. The whole thing just, you listen to the news every day, it would wind me up and get me more and more angry. So another song came out of it. And before you know it, I completely scrapped my other project and I was totally concentrating on this. All the while knowing that it was going to be a record that nobody was going to be interested in. Nobody was going to buy it. I was probably going to take a lot of flack over it. Bush administration was tell people you're either with us or you're against us. So I guess that meant I was against them, and who knows what'll happen there. But I was obsessed. I didn't have a choice. I had to keep pushing forward. So in 2005, God, Guns, and Money came out. And, it was out 2 years, I think, before Neil Young even had Living with War. I think it really was one of the first commentaries on the subject. And so a couple of these songs actually go back that far, But I ended up re-recording everything and updating everything. And, and then other things. I had songs I had written over the years. And then a few years ago, my partner, George Porter Jr., who I was worked with the Funky Meters, and we were also partners in a band called Porter Baptiste Stoltz. It was George Porter Jr., Russell Baptiste, and myself. We got entangled in a lawsuit where an ex-manager sued us for $700,000 or something like that, trying to get money he says he spent. And so the project got pushed. It took years to fight this lawsuit. So the record got pushed on the side again. Every time I try to get it going, something would happen. Either, the lawsuit, I became broke. Then I had health issues. I fought a bout of cancer that took a couple of years to recover from. And so anyway, putting all that aside, I finally got it out. Thank God I finally have it finished. It's finished. It's you can find it right now on Apple and on YouTube. You can stream it. You can download it on iTunes. I'm still waiting for it to go live on Spotify and Tidal and all the other streaming sites, but it went live last Friday
Okay.
on Apple and YouTube. Yeah.
All right. New World Rising. It's live
Yeah. And I started releasing singles. I'm sorry. I take it back. The album's not out till April 2nd, but I started releasing singles. The singles are coming out every Friday. So I released last Friday, the first single came out, a song called You Can Never Die. And it's available on Apple and YouTube and soon to be on Spotify and Tidal and all the other sites. And then I'll have a single dropping every Friday leading up to the record release on the 2nd.
Sweet. So why don't we kind of leave it there? Because I want to, when we hang out next, do a deep dive on the album, some of the songs, and then some of your experience as a session player, and how all that's interwoven, what you've learned, and how maybe that contributed to the artistry and your approach to being in the studio and when you're writing songs. And we can
sure
things one at a time. And look, we did not give a comprehensive Brian Stoltz bio today. We a little baby surface scratch of what's up, so we can hang out and do some of that too.
They'll get it eventually. Yeah, it's fine.
And Chris Kelly said, "Hey man, be sure you mention me in the podcast." So I said, dude, I texted him back. I'm like, dude, don't worry. I will throw your sorry butt under the bus here at the very end in the last minute if anyone catches your name, brother.
This is so much fun.
So hopefully when we come back, we can get Chris to hang out with us.
We'll have him next time. Yeah, we'll have him next time. I'm gonna jump on him about this. He needs to watch his calendar.
That's never going to happen, but I'll start giving him like automatic updates of when, leading up 24 hours in advance, like all the way up to our record time. So,
there you go. And we'll both start calling him leading up to the session.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, Brian, this has been awesome. So we're going to hang out again. So we're going to release some more as we get closer to April 2nd and maybe even after, but we're going to tackle this in depth. Man, listen, thanks so much for your time, man. This is awesome hanging out.
Pleasure, David. Well, always a pleasure. And I look forward to next time. Man,
listen, I will plug New World Rising, Brian Stoltz. I'll plug everything in the show notes with links so everyone knows where to find you and all that good stuff. So no worries there. Until next time, man. To the rest of the world, it'll look like we hang out tomorrow, but it'll be a little bit. But we'll hang out soon, man. We get to do this again.
All right. Thank you, David.
Thanks, man. Hang tight.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks for tuning in to the Guitar Gavel podcast, and a special thanks to Steve Kuykendall for composing this music and being such the great guy and friend that you are. As a reminder, hit the subscribe button and sign up for our twice weekly newsletter at guitargavel.com.